Well, the fourth week of the 2025 legislation has come to an end. It is over. It's in the books, and it seems like the legislative session is flying by really, really quick with everything that's on board. So, in JFAC, which stands for the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, I'm on that committee, and we start at 8 a.m. sharp, and we go till about 9:30, and sometimes till 10. But after the committee is done, we always run upstairs in different budget groups where we meet together and we try to do a deep dive into the budget. So JFAC is a hard, fast, many hours of work in the committee and outside of the committee as you try to figure out these $1 million budgets, what's being spent and why it's being spent. So this week we had the higher education presidents in, and they presented their budget. So let me start out first with Boise State. Boise State University's President Marlene Tromp. That is not Trump, it's Tromp, T-R-O-M-P. And she is the president, and she's actually from Wyoming, I believe. But anyway, she presented the university's 2026 budget, and they're asking for $309.3 million. And so we asked a bunch of questions. Why? What's going on? How are you using it? What are you building with it? And what kind of a product at the other end are we getting out of this for $309 million? Anyway, and then we did that. Then the discussion kind of shifted. We went into diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, which seems to be a big subject here at the Capitol. And so many questions were asked about that. And she tried her best to answer them. She seemed to kind of skirt some of the questions, and it caused a little bit of tension on the committee, and you could feel it. And some things were said that probably shouldn't have been said, but anyway, we got around that. And then the next subject that President Trump was asked was about the legal fees, the legal suit that was going on between Boise State and Big City Coffee. Several years ago, Big City Coffee had just started a business on campus. It was only 42 days into business, and they were kind of forced off the campus by student activists and by the university itself because the owner says, because she feels, is because of her support for the university's law enforcement and for law enforcement in general. The university has spent over $1.5 million in this lawsuit case over the last 4 years. And so senators and representatives asked the question, what money is being spent? Is this the taxpayers' money? And she assured us that it was not the taxpayers' money, that it was interest on some of the other income they had. But needless to say, the courts have favored the Big City Coffee and awarded them $4 million. And President Trump let us know that they plan to appeal that ruling. And so, anyway, so that was the end of Boise State. And then at that point, Idaho State University, new president, Robert Wagner. He's been in this position for 1 year. In fact, I think he said 1 year to the date that he actually reported to JFAC. And I think he said he was on the job for 1 day last year before standing before the JFAC for his budget last year. So here we are a year later, and he's presenting the 2026 budget of $177.2 million. And again, so we ask questions, trying to figure out where's this money being spent, how's it being spent, what's our ROI on it, and lots of good conversations. These presidents are very, very smart. They know their stuff, and when they don't know it, they have some pretty good backups to help with the answers. So anyway, one of the subjects that come up with President Wagner was the money that we had given them last year. I think it was back in 2023. We gave the ISU $900,000 to go build a forensic lab. They only spent $53,000, and then they gave the rest to Bannock County for the idea that Bannock County would go and create this forensic lab. Several months down the road, sometime, Bannock County says, you know what, we're going to split, we're not doing this. And ISU never went back to try and get the money from Bannock County. And so we've kind of lost track of some of the money, and so we were a little upset about that. And you should be upset about that. It's your tax money. And so President Wagner, though, he promised that he recognized that ISU did not do a good job of tracking the money, and he pledged that they would do a much better job, that they would follow the legislative directories and directives in the future. So we'll see what happens there. Next up was the University of Idaho. This one is President C. Scott Green, and he stood before the committee and discussed his budget. And his budget at the University of Idaho is $210.2 million. Again, we dove into that, asked questions about it, and so it was a good conversation. President Green, one of the smartest men I think I know, just a great guy and very on the ball. He is one you cannot ask a question that he doesn't have an answer for you right off the bat. Great man. Anyway, on that, he also was asked a lot of questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI, and he had an answer for all of it, and said we're getting rid of it. It's not there. He also talked about the purchase of the University of Phoenix, or the process of trying to purchase it, I should say. They have not purchased it. And there's some at the Capitol that are for it, and there's a lot of people that are against it, them going out and purchasing. I think it's kind of a neat idea, as long as we can make sure that the state of Idaho is safe and protected if something goes wrong. And everything I see, it looks like there's several levels that would have to fail before it ever fell back onto the state of Idaho. Anyway, he assured the committee that the university is financially protected, highlighting a $20 million breakup agreement that would cover any due diligence costs if the deal does not materialize. And so he basically said, we're kind of in a stalemate until you as legislators tell us what to do. And so that's kind of where it sits with the purchase of the University of Phoenix. Next up was Lewis Clark State College. And this is President Cynthia Pemberton. I think I pronounced that right. Anyway, she's got lots of energy. She's excited to always stand before JFAC, and just it's a great conversation with her. Her budget, she's asking for $44.1 million. And lots of questions were asked about what she's doing with it and their growth and their student attendance. And I believe that when her student attendance was dropping a little bit. And she said, we're not going to compete with the big universities. We will never compete with them. I think she said her goal is around, what was it, 40,000? I can't remember what it was. But she says, we're not going to try and compete with the other universities. Some of the things that she brought up, though, that was a little bit disturbing is what we're paying her professors and her associate professors. And she had a nice little graph that showed it and the data to support it. But basically, her professors there at LCU are getting paid less than the average teachers at our K through 12 schools. And so we need to do a little better there. And she said, you know, I'm seeking $288,000 of discretionary funding just to get them up a little bit farther, but that she would really like to have an additional $1.2 million to be able to compete with K through 12 teachers. And so that was a little disturbing to see that we were that far behind. So we're looking at that. Let's see, Friday was a big day in JFAC. We did the change of employee compensation, so CEC is what we call it here, and that had to do with the benefits for state employees, getting them paid. And we have had a lot of discussion on that. I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, we had a vote on that, and stalemate, didn't have anything happen, and we went at it again this week. There were several proposals. There was a proposal from my good friend, Representative Furness, who had a great proposal. We had one from the governor. We had one from the legislator leadership from the House and from the Senate, and then I had mine proposal. But all of them died. We didn't get anything done. But I think we had a great debate and a great discussion, and now we know where we're at, and we'll roll up our sleeves and go back to work and get something for our state employees. I believe that we have some pretty awesome state employees here that do an incredible job, that deserve money, and if we keep losing them because we're not paying them, we as a state are going to miss out on money because we train them and then they leave. And so we need to do a good job of, we don't want to make them rich, we don't want to compete with the private sector, but we do need to be able to compete with the cities and councils, cities and counties. So some of the things that happened Friday, though, there was a few breaks during throughout the session, throughout the committee meeting, and maybe just to tell you a couple of what went on. So one of the breaks is about what you could vote for. Okay, so here's the scenario. So I make a motion. Say I make the first motion, and then someone else is presented and makes a second motion, and somebody else makes the third motion. So you have three motions on the table. You vote going backwards. Well, if I make the first motion and I decide, oh, I really like the third motion better, I cannot go vote for that motion. I cannot support that motion without first withdrawing my motion. And that happened, I think, that scenario happened twice about whether you can vote on something after you had already made the motion or seconded it. And so twice we kind of had to stop and have that discussion and figure out how to do that. The next one, though, that we had was an interesting one, was how do you calculate the majority? And you might think, well, that's a no-brainer. How do you do majority? Well, that came up today or Friday. And so here's the scenario we had. There's 20 voting members on the committee. If all 20 are present, then the majority would be 11, right? 11 is the majority, and so if you voted and got 11 votes, then it would pass. Or if you have 11 votes that were against it, then it would fail. And so that went on, but then you got to think about, so we were running along, and so some of this legislators were leaving. We were down to 15 voting members of the committee, and the question was asked, what is the majority? Is it 8 or is it still 11? And so we went at ease, and the discussion took place, and it was interesting. So two different occasions that happened where that majority, and we used it both two different ways when the votes were counted up. So if nothing else happened out of that yesterday, it should have told everybody how important it was to have rules in place. And House leadership has pushed back on having rules. And so anybody that watched JFAC, anybody that participated in JFAC understands now the importance of having rules and voting on those rules. And that was leadership, House leadership, that made some decisions on not supporting rules and having those. So anyway, it was kind of a stressful committee, but I think some good things happened. We had turns and bumps along the way, but we'll work together and we'll find a great solution, and we'll move on, and we'll get the state employees some money, which they rightly deserve. Okay, next up, I serve also on the Senate Education Committee. And one of the things we did this week was the reappointment. So we look at gubernatorial appointments. So all of the directors and all of the boards, we as senators, we have to approve those. And so they come before us, they introduce themselves and tell us why they would be a good fit for this. And then we either approve it or we don't approve it. This week we had Sherilyn Bear from Firth, Idaho, down in our neighborhood. And here was to be gubernatorial reappointment to serve on the Idaho Public Charter School Commission. Now, this woman is awesome. She just knocked the ball out of the park. She has served in the traditional public schools, and she's also served in charter schools. And so she's got experience in both worlds. And she brings some great experience and great knowledge to the table. I asked her the question is, how can we learn from what is in the charter school, what we're doing in the charter school? How can we learn some of those principles or different things that they're doing and be able to bring it back into the traditional public school? Some of those things that seem to work. And she talked about that, and she believed that it was possible. However, there is some tension between the charter schools and our traditional schools. And she says we need to work to remove that tension to a certain point. She says there is some competition between charter schools and traditional schools. And I, for one, believe competition is good, but we need to work together. The whole reason we had charter schools was as a lab where we can go test some things, see if it works. If it works, bring it over into the traditional schools. I believe Sherilyn Bear is going to be the one that's going to make that happen. And so as a committee, we approved Pastor, and then she went on to the Senate floor. And I believe we voted on that and passed her there as well. And so I'm excited to see her serve. She's pretty awesome. We had new legislation come into a new RS come into the Senate Ed Committee that we voted to send to the Senate floor with a due pass recommendation. That bill, or RS, was presented by Senator Treg Berndt. And it was basically saying school districts, set up some kind of plan on how to deal with mobile devices. We don't care what it is, but set something up. Now, if you remember, last week I talked about a Boise High School teacher that sought me out and wanted to tell me about what was going on at the Boise High School. She said the kids check their phone in from bell to bell. Check it in the morning, they don't get it back until after the bell at night. And after school is done. She says you cannot believe the feeling. Just the feeling is different in the high school. So their cafeterias are noisy because the kids are talking. That they went and bought board games so the kids could actually play board games, and they're doing it. So Senator Bernst's legislation, I think, is going to be really good. It really, really encourages, and it says, districts, you need to have a plan for how to handle mobile devices and interruptions in your class. So that was good. Also, later on that week, we reviewed educational rules. So again, these are rules. So you set laws, set statutes, and then based on those statutes, on some of those statutes, they need to interpret those and create rules. How do they implement those statutes? And that's kind of what these educational rules are that we were looking at. So some of the rules that we looked at was dealing with communications and technology, computer technology. So the Department of Education has decided to drop communications as a required class and put technology, a new class, technology class, as a requirement for high school graduation. On the surface, that sounds really good, but let me tell you, I have interviewed several young people for jobs and for internships, and our young people are lacking some communication skills, and they need that class. And some say, well, we will teach communication skills in our English classes and in our history classes. We can have them stand up in the class and present an idea. Well, communications is more than just telling them to say eye contact, talk loud, project your voice, don't read your talk, get your hands out of your pocket, quit dancing around. There's more that's being taught in those communications class. Now, am I one to say we don't need the technology? No, absolutely not. We need technology. I am a computer geek. I love computers. I love technology, and we need those classes. But we also need communications. We are a society that is bent on our head down looking at our phones and texting. We need to make sure we don't allow our kids to go through without some communication skills. So the next rule that we kind of talked about was social science, content standards. There was some on the committee that felt like the content standards in social science was portraying the American Indians as the victim and the white man as the terrible, wicked aggressors. And so there was a big discussion on that. In fact, I had a member from the Idaho Freedom Foundation come in and talk to me Friday afternoon about how terrible this content was, is because we were treating the Indians American Indians as the victims. And I talked to him and I says, well, weren't they the victims? Didn't we take their land away? Didn't we push them into the reservation? And he just kind of like sat there and looked at me. And the truth is, yeah, it was. Now, I say we learn from the mistakes or things we did and we get better, but I don't believe in paying reparations for slavery or for the Indians. I don't believe in that. That was history. That's what our ancestors did, and they done it. It's what it is, but we go on and live forward. And so I think we teach history the way it should be, but I don't think we should hide it. And so I guess I'm teach it the way it was is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, also I talked last week about that I was serving on a model school facility committee, and that's where I want to create this cookie cutter standardized school, model school, several different sizes, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. The idea is that we do it as a cookie cutter. We get best practices in. We find out the best way that learning experience and what needs to be in a classroom to teach and to learn. And we figure that out. We figure out the best practice for HVAC and for our safety of our kids and all of that. We set standards and we go forward and build it. Well, that seemed to me so huge, this great, big, huge elephant. And I thought, how do I eat that elephant? And so the committee's been moving kind of slow. And so I went ahead and set up a meeting with Mike Munger. He's the program manager for the school safety in Idaho, with Guy Bleisner. I believe he's from Idaho Falls, and he is a school board safety and a security analyst. And then I had Brandon Payne, who is a consultant from Alabama. It's great to hear his southern drawl. But we talked about this model school facility and how do we do it, and we kind of warped into something. And I believe what we came up with is, if you were to build a school that was perfect, you'd first have to have the blueprints. And before you have the blueprints, you first have to have the standards. What is the standard square footage per student for an elementary student and for a middle school student and for a high school student? And so you get all those standards out. And so I believe we have a path forward. I'm excited about the meeting. Went really, really well. We'll first put standards together and see what happens. So working for that. If any of you are out there that are school teachers, educators, constructors, or architects, give me a text. Let me know what some of those standards are and what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, last thing that happened that I want to talk about was the Idaho Energy Caucus. We had that this week, and basically it's just a caucus where anybody can join, but we come together and we talk about energy. And who would know energy better than the director of INL? And so Dr. John C. Wagner, the director of INL, came and spoke. The neat thing about Director Wagner is he didn't get into this position going up through the administrative steps. He got in this position because he's a nuclear scientist. And if you want to see somebody get excited about nuclear and almost kind of giddish, talk to Director Wagner. He knows his stuff. You will not stump him with a nuclear question. Just outstanding man. Love the man. He's got some great incentives and innovation and ideas of how to bring nuclear power to fruition in our nation and across the world. He talked about nuclear reactors and how to produce powers, how they're studying spent nuclear fuel and how they're hoping to be able to reuse it, recycle it. He talked about batteries. I don't know if you know, but INL created the battery for the Mars rover. Okay, it was created in our backyard at the INL. The other thing that we produce out there that many people don't know is we produce the armor for the Abrams tank. And I got to work as a computer guy. I got to go out to SMC and see some of the stuff that was going out there. It was kind of cool. But anyway, I don't know if it's still true, but 2 or 3 years ago it was true. We have never had anyone killed that was inside an Abrams tank. It's because our armor that we create at the INL in your backyard is so awesome. Okay? And the other thing that they do really good at the INL that he talked about was cybersecurity. We're leading the nation in cybersecurity in what we do out there. And so we got some pretty good stuff out there. And I tell you what, if you ever want to take a tour of the INL, you should get a hold of them and ask them. Take your kids out there. They'll get excited about science and engineering and all that stuff. So anyway, thank you for joining Breakfast with Senator Cook. I hope you have a great weekend. If you have questions, concerns, issues, text me, call me, or email me. Join me, and together we will put Idaho first. Thank you.